So here we are again, right in the middle of the book of Hebrews. We're going to be looking at chapter 7, verses 11 to 19 today. We're going to call this a perfect priesthood. It will be our title, a perfect priesthood. And again, it's a long section, so I'm not going to read it, but I will encourage you to read through it. You can stop right now, or you can wait to the end and after we're done here. Let me give you the outline of this section since it's kind of long. Verses 11 and 12, it says that it was Jesus' priesthood was independent of the law, which was incomplete. Verses 13 through 15, it was independent of a tribe. And in verses 16 and 17, it's everlasting. 18 and 19, it's guaranteed. So this is what we'll be looking at today, 11 through 19. So let's take a look at the first part of this, 11 and 12. Notice how verse 11 talks about perfection. Well, the purpose of the Levitical law, as we know from our study in Romans, was never to bring perfection. That is, never to perfect holiness in God's people. What it was for was to reveal sin. The best the priest could do, and the reason for the Levitical priesthood, was to temporarily cover over sin and transgression with these bloody rituals. It would be a reminder of the cost of sin and point forward to the cross. Now, some people get confused about salvation in the Old Testament versus salvation in the New Testament, and sometimes because of fuzzy thinking, they'll think that there's two different ways of salvation. Well, let me just affirm that there's one way of salvation. It's by faith in the promises of God. Faith in the promises of God. Now, from time period to time period, in the Bible, we call those eras or dispensations sometimes. From time to time, the content of those promises changes. So for the Old Testament believer, they were believing in the promises of God, but those promises had to do with sacrifice. Those promises had to do with a legal system, to put their trust in that and follow that. In our day, the content of the promise is Jesus, and he's the end of the line, is what Hebrews told us. In these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. Jesus is the culmination of all those promises that have gone before. And Jesus is going to make sure, that's what he says in Matthew 5, 17 and 18, that he's going to make sure that all those promises made by God ahead of time are going to come to pass. So again, perfection was not the point of the law. It was the revealing of sin, and the priests could deal with that only by covering it over. It goes on in verse 11, it says, "What further need was there for another priest to rise?" So if the Levitical law was going to bring perfection, what do we need Melchizedek for? Why did God promise a different priest that was coming? And remember, he promised that priest before the Levitical priesthood, and it extends to after, to Jesus' time. So what further need? The reasoning is if the Levitical priest could provide righteousness to the worshiper, then why would God have designated any other priest? He goes on, says, when the priesthood is changed of necessity, this is a divine requirement, a divine necessity. That's what he's revealing here. There takes place a change of law also. So what he's saying here, the law and the priest that administered the law go together. If there's a more perfect priestly ministry coming, so is there going to be a more effective law that leads to perfection. One that's not going to merely cover over sin temporarily, but one that will carry sin away permanently. And of course, the implication here is Jesus is not administering a law which couldn't take away sins. Or let me say it positively, the law that Jesus administers carries sins away as far as they are from the east, from the west. So, a new law, an independent from the law which was incomplete. That's Jesus's ministry. Verses 13 through 15 then tell us he's independent of the tribe. He says, for the one about whom these things are said belongs to another tribe. Jesus was, of course, from the tribe of Judah, the kingly tribe. Didn't provide any priests to the temple. So Jesus is not this Levitical priest. He is a different kind of priest, and that's the point the author's making. He's a Melchizedekian priest. That's a mouthful to say. If he had been a priest from the tribe of Levi, he wouldn't have this new priesthood and this new law that goes with it. So Jesus is not a priest of the old imperfect order and the old imperfect law. He's got a law and a priesthood that's independent of what came before him. And verses 16 and 17 make the point that he's everlasting. Talking about Melchizedek here, verse 16, who became a priest not on the basis of the law of physical requirement, but according to the power of an indestructible life. And then he's going to talk about this attestation from God about him. The point here is that Jesus is an everlasting priest. Jesus's implication here, the background, of course, is the resurrection of Jesus, that Jesus's resurrection qualifies him to be a permanent, everlasting priest, fulfilling what's expected and fulfilling the sign of a priest like Melchizedek. So Jesus is this perfect and everlasting priest, not from the order of Levi, but from a new order, the order of Melchizedek. And we go on, he talks about the attestation. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. This is an oath from God. This is sworn by God in Psalm 110, verse 4, that that there's going to be this perfect Melchizedekian order. And the writer here is saying that this is Jesus, this everlasting priest. Then as we draw to a conclusion here, verses 18 through 19, is the permanence, the guarantee. He says, on the one hand, there's a nullification of the former commandment with the priesthood of Jesus. That is, the Mosaic law specifically is nullified. He's going to make that case here when he talks about the covenant that Jesus administers. It's not saying that the old law was out without any use or without any use in making us sensitive toward God. Not saying that. Paul tells us in Romans 15, if you recall, I think 15 verse 4 or 5, that the Old Testament was written for our edification and encouragement. So it's not saying that there's no use for it at all, but it's saying that the use as a means of approaching God is been nullified. We have a better hope, he says at the end of verse 19, through which we come near to God. So this is the better hope, is Jesus, is the ministry of Jesus, the priesthood of Jesus. So for these original readers, living in a time of change is proving to them to be very hard. And it's especially hard for them who are being called to make a radical break and with the old way of life, the Judaic way of life, and to make a commitment and find acceptance with God through Jesus. Their commitment, as we go through the book, you'll see more and more, their commitment means not only a personal reorientation of how they're drawing near to God, how they expect to draw near to Him, but also a break with comfortable relationships, comfortable family patterns, comfortable patterns of worship. It's asking a lot of them. You and I are also called to leave behind anything that keeps us to a greater and greater dependence on Jesus for our sanctification. He's going to call us to be like Jesus, to leave it all behind as we go forward in this book, specifically when we get to chapter 12. we need to realize, brothers and sisters, and I need to be telling my soul regularly that Jesus is the only way to God, that Jesus is at the center of it. His crucifix is the dividing line, not only in all of history, but in my own life and in your life as well. The only hope we have, and the hope, remember, is a confident expectation. The only hope we have to be able to draw near to God is through Jesus. He is the only way, and he deserves our undiluted and heartfelt commitment. God bless you.